Hi, I'm Charlie Mato-Toyela with Blue Bear Flutes and bluebearflutes.com. We have videos these days on just about every subject with Native American flutes in mind, as well as a wonderful class that you can take here on YouTube and learn more about playing the Native American flute, and so many other great things we have here for free, as well as the hundreds of thousands of flutes we ship all over the world all the time. So if you haven't seen our website yet, it's bluebearflutes.com. That's bluebearflutes.com. Once again, bluebearflutes.com. So many videos I've had people say, "What's your website?" or "Where can I buy these?" And I'm like, oh boy, I must have missed it in that video. But anyway, today is just a quick little kind of a talk or discussion we have here. Discussions always sound so negative, so I'd say this is a talk we're going to have about why a beginner should learn different scales. And actually, it's word for word what a beginning flute player had asked me just a few days back with regards to learning the chromatic scale and learning the standard scale and the major scale and the blues scale and what is all this stuff about. And I completely understand why someone would ask. It's incredibly overwhelming. Now, we probably have a couple of hecklers out there, in case you're a young person and don't know what a heckler is, because I don't teach that word in school anymore, I don't think. It's somebody who stands in the background and says, "Ah, ha, 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 you're funny," or worse. But anyway, we probably have a couple of hecklers out there saying, "I don't need any scales, I just play the flute." Well, that's all good. It really is. And I agree with you to some degree. Actually, for 99% of the time, I think I agree with you. But today, like I said, what we want to talk about is why a beginner should learn different scales. Is it necessary? I mean, that's a good point right there in itself. Did the original people play different scales? I mean, this is some really good stuff. I have a lot of videos on playing and making Native American flutes. If you haven't seen them, check us out. It's youtube.com/bluebearflutes. Same thing as our website is bluebearflutes.com. You'll find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok these days. Still, Instagram, I think, is my favorite. We really don't make any money there or anything. We just have a lot of really beautiful pictures and videos that my wife posts of places we've been and things we've done. So that's Instagram.com/bluebearflutes. To kind of dive right in here, easy stuff. This is what is considered today a Native American flute. They've changed mildly over the years. This one's probably lower in tone than other Native American flutes. The standard scale on any Native American flute, typically anyway, I should say, is covering all the holes as the lowest note and uncovering them one at a time until you get to the top. And if you notice where there's a blank space in here on this 5-hole flute, if you have one of those modern 6-hole flutes with a piece of leather tied on it, I would just pretend that that hole doesn't even exist, because everything that we talk about on our YouTube channel typically is about traditional 6-hole flutes, which are not like that, or the modern 6-hole flutes. We try to make a point every time just to leave that finger covered. So that's the standard Native American flute scale. It's basically what we call a minor pentatonic scale. I guess there again, I keep hearing those hecklers in my mind. The original Native American flutes that were made historically were not necessarily keyed to a particular scale, but they were still rudimentarily in a minor pentatonic scale, even though somebody in South Florida thinks that he invented the scale that our flutes are in. The historical flutes were pretty much in a minor pentatonic scale. The only one historically that wasn't in a minor pentatonic scale was an ethereal flute inside of a book called The Ben Hunt Guide to Indian Arts and Crafts, where they teach you to drill this hole on a flute about this bigger diameter, and it just didn't work out. So that's why you keep that piece of leather tied on your flute. And once again, I say theoretically because that flute doesn't really exist. It's only in the book. I have videos about that if you're curious more about the Ben Hunt flute or 6-hole flutes, traditional ones or otherwise. So the standard scale, covering all the holes, plays the lowest note because of the size of the volume of the interior chamber of this flute. So the length and the diameter of the flute make up a volume, like liquid, for example. You could pour liquid in it, it would hold X amount of water or what have you. Currently it's holding X amount of air. With all holes covered, that has the largest body cavity, the largest chamber inside of this flute, and it will produce the lowest note. The only way to produce a lower note with this flute is to partially cover, which is restricting the bottom of it. Let's see if I can do it here. I can do it on my leg. So what I'm doing is it sounds like I'm bending a note, which is a technique we talk about in some other videos, but I'm partially covering, restricting the airflow, and slowing the airflow down in this particular manner causes the flute to go lower in tone. So that's the only way that you can actually make a lower tone flute out of a set sized chamber, is by restricting the air. Or you can add another chamber to it, of course, but that's still against the point. So when you uncover one of these holes, the air actually escapes out of that, so it loses some of the pressure, causing it to be a shorter flute in essence, really, if you think about it. You could virtually cut it off right there and it'd be really close to the same note, but doing that causes it to play a higher note. This is a higher note, higher, higher. So very simple stuff. Those notes in succession, or even out of whack, make a scale. The scale, whatever we call it, if we call it a scale, or if we go back in time 1,000 years and ask the old people what they used to call it, that information's been lost, of course. But if we ask them what they called it, they may have a different name for it. A lot of the words that we use today are based on mathematic equations, because the scales relate to math in some degree. So, like I said, when we call this a scale, a pentatonic scale, penta means 5, so you have 5 notes. That's 5 notes. This note here I'm about to uncover is the same as. That's why it's not a hexagonal scale, it's a pentatonic scale, because it has 5 notes that are different from one another. This one is a repeat of the bottom note, if the flute's in tune, of course. And in the case of the other scales that we talk about, we have really 2 notions. That's why I brought a couple of extra flutes up here with me today. We have 2 notions we need to consider ourselves with. And once again, I realize for you advanced or even medium flute players out there who've been playing for a little while, this might be way basic for you, but it's something that we've really needed to talk about forever and a day. And I've had a couple of beginning flute players ask me, so here we are. There's 2 things we need to talk about when we discuss scales. This flute being in a pentatonic minor scale, or minor pentatonic scale, whichever way you feel comfortable, it is actually tuned to a key, or it is a keyed flute. This one is in a key of E, so it's E minor pentatonic. That's one thing we're discussing when we talk about flutes and scales. Well, Native American flutes anyway. This one is keyed as well. It's specifically made to be in the key of A. So historically, flutes were close to this size. If they were in the key of A, that may have been completely by accident, because we didn't have tuning forks in ancient, Native American country that I'm aware of anyway, and I've seen a lot of it. But we didn't have tuning forks, and we didn't have a way to be sure that each tone was set exactly to the same frequency and to the same this and to the same that. And that's why, especially, I feel like anyway, I want to speak out of turn for other Native people like myself, especially for a Native American person, it seems silly when someone says, were the historical flutes tuned 432 or 440? I mean, it's not really either one. I can almost guarantee you beyond a shadow of a doubt it was neither. That this note may have been close to a 440A range, and the next one was probably 5 hertz sharp, and this one was probably 10 hertz flat, and this one, it's all over the board basically is what it boils down to. But getting back to discussion here, this is in the key of A minor pentatonic. So you can hear it's a higher tone than the one I played originally. I do have videos about flutes and their scales. I have a couple of really good ones that talk about what the scales sound like, and kind of gives you a demonstration of each of them, so you can take a look at those videos and see, basically what each of the flutes sound like. Then here's a higher tone one. This one's in the key of high D. It's a high tone flute. I first started playing one of these instruments, oh, by the way, this one is, of course, a lot more close to historical types of flutes, except for the fact that it was tuned to a key of D minor pentatonic. The other flutes would have been rudimentarily pentatonic, as I said, but not necessarily specifically. That means that some of the notes were a little bit one way or the other, like I just said. But a lot of people feel like these high-toned flutes are too shrill and too this and too that, and then I play it for them, and they're like, except for that one sounded really good. And it's because I've been playing for a while. When I first started playing Native American flute, I had already been in band and played jazz music and played, gosh, lots of stuff, lots of classical music, just gobs of classical music, mostly on brass instruments, some on the silver flute and some of this and some of that. Never been much into strings. I do like the banjo because, of course, it's in a minor key, so I like it a lot. But I'd never played an instrument like this, so I didn't even care that it was in a key or that it was in a specific scale or any of that matter. It was fun playing it. I loved it. I just picked it up and went with it. And a lot of people do that, and it's great to do that. So that's part of the answer is, should you learn these scales? You don't have to. You really don't. If you know where the notes are, as long as you can make a pleasing sound on this thing, I say go for it. You're set. It's when you start wanting to play modern music that you really need to learn the other scales. And some people say, maybe I don't want to learn modern music. And that's fine. It really is. Myself, every time I pick up my E flute, I don't know what it is, but I just really... I just really like playing that blues note in there. I almost have a hard time stopping myself. The fact that I know it's there, the fact that I learned that blues note, which, by the way, we speak about that in several blues, how to play the blues on the flute videos. But the fact that I know that scale is there, that note is there, makes me want to play it. And it fit in so well. And initially you're like, oh, that's a very pretty Native American flute sounding song. And then the last few seconds, you're like, oh, he's playing the blues on that flute. So ideally, for someone who can play all these notes and scales and all this crazy stuff, the ideal thing is to find a way to stitch it all together and make the listener enjoy it and not think to themselves, oh, so he can play the blues on the flute. Oh, okay, that's nice, I suppose. It's a matter of putting it all together and making it enjoyable. Like I said, that's the important thing. You may be trying to play Happy Birthday at somebody's birthday party. I've played the wedding march for people before, so there's a lot of reasons you may want to play different notes from the scale, and you might decide that you just that note I was playing there is not in the minor pentatonic scale. It is a chromatic note, and it sounded good. And you can do that. You really can. It's just learning and growing. The reason a beginner, to just flat out answer this question, might want to learn some different scales is because when you are a beginner, you have expectations, and you want to meet those expectations. If your expectations are being able to play this exact song, and a fine example is Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace has a note in it that is not in this scale. I mean, it's not just right, so you have to learn how to play that note. And for that reason, you may want to learn that scale. Do you have to? No, not at all. And do you have to have a flute in every scale to go to the other side of that coin, about flutes and scales? There are some songs that you may play that sound good in a high tone and some that you may play good that sound in a low tone. I personally have this idea that low tone flutes play slow music better and high tone flutes play fast music better. There's a lot of good reasons for that. We talked about in maybe a couple other videos. But the thing is, if let's say you picked out a Jethro Tull song and you want to play that on the flute, which Oh my gosh. If you're not from the 60s and you've heard somebody say, "Oh, you play the flute, play me some Jethro Tull." If you've not heard that yet, you will. You really will. I don't wish it on you, but you will. And don't get me wrong, good flute music, but not Native American flute music, and how people believe those two things go together, I just don't know. But if you decide you want to do that, you may need to learn some other scales. If Jethro Tull's playing a song that's in the key of C, you might be best having a flute in the key of C to play it. But then again, is it C minor or C major that he's playing in? If he's playing in C major, you probably want to play a G minor flute. If he's playing in C minor, then you need a C minor flute. My gosh, those are so many other videos we have coming up. But the one reason I point all this out is you can play any song that you can play on this flute, on this one, or a historically correct 6-hole flute, which has 6 fingerings that you uncover like that, or on one of those modern 6-hole flutes that has this extra one that you, for whatever reason, they drilled a hole and you got to keep it tied up all the time. That one will play all the same songs as well. Doesn't matter what key the flute is in. So a lot of things to consider. I hope this has answered your question. Like I said, basically it's a yes and no, and I just wanted to give you the pros and cons about it, and hopefully that helps out. So if you think that you have learned everything about the Native American flute so far, please let me know in the comments, because that is something I would really like to hear about. If you are still learning, please let us know. That's a good thing too. Just like this video here, most of our YouTube videos, especially these days, are made from comments from viewers. So we appreciate you so very much. And oftentimes we'll even mention, if we contact the viewer, we'll even mention the comment and say, is it okay, if we put this in the video? And a lot of times they say yes. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Just kind of depends on how things are going. But anyway, I hope this has helped you all very much, and I really love hearing from you. So thank you very much for that as well. Once again, this is Charlie Mato-Toyela signing out for Blue Bear Flutes and BlueBearFlutes.com. Happy flute playing and happy flute making. We'd love to hear from you and see you again very soon. Take care.